Can you hear me? I really hope that the background noise isn't prevalent, because I installed a AC in my window last week. Me and my grandpa did. We installed it last Thursday because, believe it or not, it gets really hot in apartments without air conditioning if you live in the desert, which, make no mistake about it, Utah has trees. Utah has pine trees up north and everything, but still gets fucking hot. We're still technically in a desert. I know Phoenix friends are going to listen to this and go, pussy, but quite frankly, I don't care. It gets fucking hot. Not going to lie to you. It gets pretty damn hot. Especially since it's supposed to be 94 or 95 here in Salt Lake City today. That's pretty fucking hot for June. And considering I'm a delivery guy and have to deliver in this most of the week, yeah, not exactly comfortable. Anyway, welcome to the second edition of the BK Project podcast. I am your host, of course, Brady James Kellogg, a son of two remarkable parents and grandson of two remarkable grandparents. I'm just kissing ass right now. Don't mind me. Anyway, before we get to the main event, which is what you all came here to listen to, the 92-93 Phoenix Suns and how they affected me and how they affected a city that really wasn't Major League back in the day. I mean, we're going to talk about 1992, 1993, and we're going to go into before that as well. Want to address some things, especially over the last week. I mean, we're talking about, there's a conversation that we're having right now about suicide and mental illness, because two very prominent people in their prominent fields, unfortunately, killed themselves last week. Kate Spade did it. Kate Spade, that news came out last Wednesday, and she's a very famous fashion designer in New York, and also, I believe, the stepsister of David Spade. So, unfortunately, she, very famous designer, and unfortunately she passed away. And then last Friday I was jolted by this news because I've watched him for years. Anthony Bourdain. I mean, world traveler, chef. They call him a bad boy chef, but honestly he's one of the good ones. I loved him because of his cranky cantankerousness. I mean, I think that's why a lot of people loved him and loved watching him, because he made people actually feel like people. You know, he didn't go to these other countries, and portray. I mean, I remember there was an episode he did in Iran where he went there and he didn't portray them as savages. He portrayed them as actual people. Who knew that these people were actual people? Who knew these people weren't actually savages blowing each other up and screaming la, 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 like that? He portrayed them as people, which is what it should be. Yet, unfortunately, a lot of us let stereotypes get in the way. He didn't do that. And he went more into the travel aspect and then the people aspect of Parts Unknown. I mean, it was still a lot about food, but on his latest show on CNN, he went into more of the human aspect, and he humanized a lot of these people, and that's why I feel like it's pretty damned unfortunate that we lose him and Kate Spade. And unfortunately, this is the conversation we need to have now, which is mental illness and suicide. It has become an epidemic. I know people will say, well, you're using superlatives. and trying to make your point. It is a goddamn epidemic in this country. Suicide has risen 50% since the early 2000s in America. It's risen in Utah since 2012, 32%. I mean, you can try to explain and try to factor in a lot of things however you want to. But the fact of the matter is that it's become an epidemic. And it's not as simple, and depression isn't as simple as telling someone, go out and see nature and get some fresh air. You'll feel less depressed. That meme is bullshit. Okay? People need help. And the fact of the matter that our governments have cut basic mental health services that could help a lot of people. The fact that our government has cut a lot of those services, and the fact that insurances don't cover or consider these things pre-existing conditions and don't cover them, is absolutely preposterous. We need to start treating mental health better in this country. We need to start figuring this out. Your brain's a part of your body too. Your mental health and your mental state is part of your body. And if it's not well and it's not working correctly, it affects the rest of you. So we need to start taking this seriously. We need to start taking this seriously now. Suicide hotlines are a good thing. They're a great thing even. But it's not enough. We need services. We need more. We need to start putting money and start researching and start solving the problem now. Because I don't know about you, but I kind of don't like it when people die. That's just the way I look at it. I don't want people to die. I like people being alive. I know it seems so simple and so passe to say that, but it's true. And one more thing, and this is to the people who say, well, why do we glorify celebrity death? We're not fucking glorifying celebrity death, you assholes. Okay? And to the people that cry over celebrity deaths, you know what? They have every right to. Especially when that person goes into a line of work that affects a whole lot of people. Anthony Bourdain affected a whole lot of people. Kate Spade affected a whole lot of people. I mean, I was one of those people that laughed when people started crying over Michael Jackson dying. And you can say Michael Jackson's crazy all you want, and I'll agree with you, but the fact that his music and it's a lot of these musicians as well. I mean, Michael Jackson's music affected a lot of people. Prince's music affected a lot of people. You know, if it affects a lot of people, you goddamn right people are going to cry about it. You know, people are going to get emotional about it. That person was a part of their life, and now they're gone. So they should be allowed to mourn and do whatever they want to for a person that they didn't know, because if that person affected him in that way, then why shouldn't they be allowed to have that sort of emotional reaction? Well, why don't we do the same thing for troops? We do. Families do the same thing. It's a personal thing with troops. You know, and we treat them as heroes, and we treat everyone as such. But the fact of the matter is if you're a person that did all that work, that inspired and helped, and quite frankly, made a lot of people happy, you know, why shit on that? I feel like we need to be a little nicer to each other. I feel like we need to start being a little nicer to each other. And it starts with me, I know. But we need to start being a little bit nicer to each other. in this country, especially when it comes to the internet. And I know it's a conversation we need to have, and we're going to have that later in more detail, but we need to be a little bit nicer to each other and stop being dicks. Okay? Is that a deal? Good thing we're going to talk about kind of people that help the person get through and talk about some things, because that leads to this. You know, the 1992-93 Phoenix Suns. Now, we're going to go do some time travel, and I'm going to kind of do some time travel with my 29-year-old self, trying to transport to 1992-93, that year, when I was just 3 or 4 years old, 3 years old at the time, that this team, the Phoenix Suns, came into my life. They've been there the longest. They've been the team that's helped me through. And quite frankly, with no disrespect meant or intended to any of my other teams, I mean, I love the Cardinals with all my heart and being, even though they're in a shitty football league. I love the Diamondbacks and Cubs with my heart and being. I mean, those 2 championships were 2 of the greatest things I've ever experienced in sports. Watching sports. And certainly no disrespect to the Coyotes or the Golden Knights, but the Phoenix Suns were my first. And the Phoenix Suns came in 1992-93 in my life. But even before that, we're going to go back to the year 1987. Now, in those years, there was no baseball other than spring training in the Phoenix area. There was no, there wasn't any hockey to speak of besides the minor league Roadrunners. And the Cardinals were about a year or 2 away from moving from St. Louis. So the Suns, for the longest time, they were born in 1968. But for the longest time, they were the only major league team in town. And they played in an arena called the Veterans Memorial Coliseum. It wasn't quite downtown. It was north of downtown on a intersection of 19th Avenue and McDowell. They played at the Arizona State Fairgrounds. Yes, they played at the place where they had the state fair. 1970s, 80s basketball, everyone. So the Suns they play in that Coliseum. And for you Utah people listening to this, let me explain to you, a lot of this is like a lot of the love affair that you currently enjoy with the Jazz. The Jazz are the only show in town, majorly. If you want a major league sport, the Jazz are it. So you have a team, and you fall in love with certain players, and you play as certain players. I mean, this is a place that made Greg Ostertag into a folk hero. So that's kind of what Phoenix was in the late 80s. And in the late 80s, the Suns were, well, kind of terrible. They'd just gone off the drug scandal with their star player, Walter Davis. And they were searching for an identity. They'd gone through a few head coaches, gone through players galore. And Jerry Colangelo, their owner, who future generations would know as the guy that revived USA basketball in the late 2000s, was their owner. And Colangelo was very hands-on, and he didn't care how much money he spent. He wanted to win. And he cared about Phoenix, he cared about the community, but he wanted to win. and started looking at ways to rebuild the team so they could win. And one of the first things he did was bring in a former NBA Coach of the Year by the name of Cotton Fitzsimmons. Now, Cotton Fitzsimmons coached at Kansas State, coached the Kansas City Kings. That's where he got his Coach of the Year award from. I believe he made the Western Conference Finals that year, I think in the late 70s. Went to San Antonio for a bit of a late run, bit of a failed run, and then left for a year, came back, and coached Phoenix. Cotton was a gruff man, but he knew how to build a basketball team. And one of the other moves they made in late 1987, early 1988 was trading one of their young major stars guy by the name of Larry Nance to Cleveland for Kevin Johnson, Mark West, and a first-round pick to be named later. That was the genesis of the rebuild. That was the start of making the Suns, I really hate to use this term, making the Suns great again. Because the Suns have a pretty damn rich tradition. I mean, I believe, as of right now, I think even their late swoon notwithstanding coming like this, I think they're still the 5th or 6th winningest franchise in the NBA. They're in the top 10, I'll say that. So the Suns have a tradition, pretty consistent tradition of winning. Not titles, but every year they're in the playoffs. So they get these two players and their draft pick, and they use the draft pick to select a guy out of Central Michigan, a little-known guard/forward by the name of Dan Marley. Suns fans at the Civic Plaza for the draft party did not like this idea, and they booed the draft pick. So Cotton goes on the stage and very famously says, "You people will regret the day that you booed this young man." Boy, did they. And the turnaround was almost instant. The Suns became a 50-win team in 1988, 89, 90, 91. Added a few more pieces in there. They got Jeff Hornacek. Yes, Utah Jazz fans, he was ours before he was yours, bitches. I always have to say that. He was a Sun before he was a Jazz man. Sorry! But the Suns still needed that one piece. And they were building a downtown arena right in the heart of downtown Phoenix. It's going to be called the America West Arena. They were going to move in there in 1992, and they needed one guy. They needed one guy to bring in, one superstar to bring in and make them a contender and give them buzz. Because the Suns were winning. I mean, they beat the Lakers in 1990. I mean, they finally beat the Lakers. Got over that hump, but still couldn't quite get over the Western Conference Finals hump. They'd lost to Portland the previous year in 92. The last game at the Coliseum, they lost to Portland. But they needed one more piece. Just so happened there's a superstar back east who was very, very unhappy with the way things were working out. Guy by the name of Charles Barkley. He's very unhappy with the way he was being treated in Philadelphia and the fact that the Sixers were terrible at that time. So the Suns wanted to try and make a deal. Now, there were 3 teams looking to acquire Barkley's services because he wanted out of Philly. And it wasn't going to be mended. It was Phoenix, Portland, and the Lakers. Now, the Los Angeles Lakers, I actually found this out a week before recording this because I've been doing research up the yin-yang on this. Charles Barkley was a Laker. They just hadn't submitted the paperwork to the league office. But in early summer '92, there was a deal in place for Barkley to go to the Lakers, and Barkley himself has confirmed this. Barkley was going to be a Laker. The deal was Barkley to the Lakers for James Worthy and Eldon Campbell. How would that have changed things in the West at that time? The Lakers were still 1 year off a finals appearance. And they needed a guy post-Magic. Would Barkley have been that guy? It's kind of hard to tell. But that deal was in place until Philly said, nope, we're gone, no more. So, Barkley, Sixers pull out of that deal, and Barkley's in limbo. Portland's trying to make a deal, get a deal put together for Barkley. But Phoenix swoops in, and on July 17th, 1992, maybe the biggest deal or trade in the history of Phoenix sports occurs. The deal is Jeff Hornacek, Tim Perry, and I believe, I'm trying to remember the other guy, but it was Hornacek and Perry, the two main guys, heading to Philadelphia for Charles Barkley. And you put Barkley on that team, and those were some very good players on that Suns team. You had Barkley, you had Marley, you had KJ. You still had Tom Chambers, who was one of the best shooters and one of the best inside guys of the 80s, who's going to be coming off the bench now because of Barkley. You had a very good team already. Adding Barkley to the mix makes them an instant title contender. And 92-93, that's a big deal in Phoenix. Because, like I said, Phoenix is the only deal in town. The only major deal in town at that particular time. Now, again, to kind of compare Phoenix and Utah or Salt Lake City, I mean, these players in Phoenix ruled the city. Like I said, like in Salt Lake, people know who a lot of the Jazzmen are here in Salt Lake City because they're the only game in town. I mean, people know who Donovan Mitchell is here because he's plastered all over everything, and it's a big deal. The Suns were the same way. I mean, Marley had a whole bunch of endorsement deals. I mean, for God's sakes, I was watching an old game in 92 from 93 where Marley's doing a commercial for the Honda dealerships. It's one of the cheesiest things I've ever seen because it's Dan Marley and the deep voiced guy is going, "How does thunder roll across the valley of the sun? In a Honda!" That's exactly how Marley says it. It's cheesy as shit. But the Suns are celebrities in Phoenix. They're the team. And you had KJ, you had Barkley, you had all those guys. I mean, for God's sakes. Cotton stepped down at this time. Cotton Fitzsimmons had stepped down, and the Suns hired a new head coach by the name of Paul Westphal, who is himself a former Sun, played for the Cinderella Suns of the late 70s. Yet, I did not make that up. The newspapers made that up. But Paul Westphal became the coach of the Suns, was a part of that team, the only other Suns team to make the finals, by the way, in the late 70s when they played that series against Boston, and had in that series had that 3 overtime game where the Suns eventually lost in Boston and would go on to lose the series. So, Westphal is the new Suns coach. And the Suns get off to a roaring start in 93. They roll through the regular season. It's their second best record. I believe it's their second best record ever. 62-20. Roll right through the regular season. I mean, every call they seem to make goes their way. Barkley is motivated to win a title. Everyone's motivated to get to the finals and finally get over that hump. They roll through the season. Get to the playoffs, and the playoffs start off a little rocky. They're playing the Lakers, their old hated foe. Old hated foe, the Los Angeles Lakers. Didn't even have a winning team that year, but they're the 8th seed. And I'm going to make this argument later about the toughness of conferences and different eras. There's a 37-team win in the postseason in the Western Conference. You want to tell me basketball was tougher then? Yeah, the rules were a little tougher. But come on. 37-win team making the playoffs. Come on, man. But that Laker team had some good players. They had Vlade Divac. And Divac was an all-star back then before he became a useless general manager for the Sacramento Kings. Lakers got off to a 2-0 series lead. And then Paul Westphal on the Game 2 podium after the game makes the guarantee that's heard around Phoenix. We will win the next 3 series games, and people will be talking about what a great series it was. Not the exact quote, but let's roll with it. So, Westphal makes his guarantee. Suns go on to win Game 3 and 4. Go back to Phoenix. They're actually trailing late in Game 5 before Dan Marley saves them, and then Oliver Miller, we'll go into him, goes apeshit in overtime, and the Suns end up winning that game by the skin of their teeth, and end up winning the series. Their next opponent would be the San Antonio Spurs. Now, these are two opponents that the Suns have had historic trouble with in the past. Even after this, the Suns have had trouble with the Lakers. They've always run into the tough Laker teams. And let's not even talk about the goddamn Spurs. But these weren't the Spurs yet. They had Avery Johnson and they had David Robinson. But they weren't the Spurs yet. They weren't coached. It was pre-Popovich. It was John Lucas coaching the Spurs at that time. And Lucas was a firebrand, former NBA player. By all accounts, a very good person by a lot of his players. But he became the coach of this Spurs team. The Spurs ended up taking the Suns to 6 games. In Game 5, needed Barkley becoming Superman in Game 5 for the Suns to pull that game out, because the Suns were trailing in that one. And in Game 6, the Suns controlled the game for the most part, but then late, they have a 4-point lead late. Spurs end up tying the game, and then Barkley comes in. And this is the misconception I have about, or the problem I have with people saying, well, this player doesn't have any rings. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, for God's sake, Adam Morrison has a ring, for God's sakes. What did he do besides go on a sideline and cry? I mean, for God's sakes. It's ridiculous. Barkley was lights out in this postseason, and when the Suns needed a big game, they got it from him. And they got contributions from all their bench players. I mean, I talked about Oliver Miller in Game 5 of the Lakers series. They had a big game from Richard Dumas. That's a damn shame what happened to Dumas. Dumas was a very good prospect. Suns brought him in, had a lot of trouble with drugs, and was out of the league in the next couple years. But he helped the Suns in the Lakers series and in the Spurs series. Tom Chambers was the guy that we mentioned earlier. He held the Suns' record for points in a game, had 62. Chambers comes in this Game 6 and gets the Suns right back in it and helps set up the Barkley game-winning shot in that Game 5. Suns win that series, and then they go and play the Seattle Supersonics. And, man, this Supersonics team was tough. I mean, this was a few years before they went to the finals themselves and played Jordan and the Bulls. But they still had Kemp, and they had Peyton, they had Ricky Pierce. They had a lot of good young players and a lot of good young talent, and they were hungry. And this Supersonics team ended up taking the Suns to 7 games. And then Barkley had, again, if they needed a big game, they got it from Barkley that year. Barkley had 44 points and 24 rebounds in a deciding Game 7. It's one of the greatest clinching games I've ever seen a player play. And I went back and watched it earlier this week. Barkley is doing everything in that game. He's hustling, he's slicing, he's dicing, he's getting to the foul line, he's elbowing players, he's getting physical with everybody. It is absolutely a marvel to watch. And as much as I love the Rain Man, and I love Shawn Kemp, I love me some Kemp dunks, Barkley owned his ass in that game. Barkley handed him his ass on a silver platter and said, "Here you go. Go and try some now, bitch." That's what Barkley did. And he got the Suns to the finals, where they would play the Chicago Bulls. This is what me and you have in common, Jazz fans. We ran into Jordan. Jordan was peak Jordan at this time. I mean, this wasn't end of his career Jordan, who was still a great player, but this was holy shit Michael Jordan. You had Jordan, you had Pippen, Paxson. This was a tough Bulls team. But the Suns had a chance because they had home court, and that promptly got swatted away. Bulls ended up leaving Phoenix with a 2-0 series lead. Go to Game 3, and the Suns end up taking the Bulls to triple overtime and winning. Kevin Johnson set a record for threes, a finals record, for most minutes played. Johnson was magic in that game. Marley was magic. Barkley was magic. You had that series, and you got it right back to where you wanted them. But then the next game, Jordan ended up dropping 55, and the Bulls would take a 3-1 lead. Suns would come back, win 5, and then in Game 6, in the game that will always rip my heart out as a Suns fan, even at a young age of 3, it wasn't Jordan taking the last shot. It was John fucking Paxson. God damn it. And it was always like that. For the bit guys, you expect Jordan to rip your heart out because he's Jordan. But John Paxson hits the 3, gives the Bulls the championship, their first three-peat, and the Suns fans are left to wonder what happened or what could have been. And it would happen this way the next couple years too. The Suns would lose in 94 to the Rockets, the eventual champions, and in 95 again, they lose to the fucking Rockets, which in that game, and the reason why I will always hate Mario Elie, because Mario Elie gave the Suns the kiss of death, which might as well have been the kiss of death for that Suns run. because the Suns weren't the same team after the LE3 in 95. But that Suns team owned Phoenix. I can't begin to tell you, after that finals run in 93, they had a parade. Now this is late June in downtown Phoenix in 110 degree temperatures. My grandma and my uncle and my mother took me to this parade, and it was amazing. You see Barkley on a float, you see all these guys. It's a massive humanity in downtown Phoenix. One of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I believe there was about 150, 200,000 people there for a team that didn't win. That's what it meant to be a Suns fan. And that's what it will always mean to be a Suns fan. Like I said, you'll go, I love all my other teams, but if the Suns ever win a championship, you better fucking believe that I'm going to wear my Kevin Johnson jersey, not wear any pants, or underwear for that matter, and run around Porky Piggin' it all around the neighborhood here where I live. That's happening if the Suns ever win a championship. And I apologize for that visual. Actually, no I don't. Sorry, not sorry. I'm going to run around Pooh-Bearing it downtown in my Suns jersey if they ever win a championship. It's going to happen. But that's what it means. I mean, like I said, I live in Salt Lake City, and they love their basketball. I mean, people will always extol the virtues of Stockton and Malone. I mean, Greg Ostertag, like I said, Greg Ostertag's a fucking folk hero here. Hornacek, they love Hornacek here. And also a funny fact about Hornacek, my uncle actually worked with his brother at a Fuddruckers in Metro Phoenix. I'm not kidding you. I shit you not, I got that information. My uncle worked with Jeff Hornacek's brother at Fuddruckers. But I was talking about celebrity culture earlier and why people affect so many other people. Why these people, these well-known people, affect so many other people. That Suns team still affects a lot of people. That run in 92-93 all the way up, people still talk about that. People still love the Suns. That's the run that got me to fall in love with sports, and that's the run that got me to fall in love with basketball. And I'll always find myself coming back to basketball because it's the old reliable, it's a beautiful sport. I mean, ball movement, passing, team. It's one of the ultimate team sports where everyone has a part. It's a beautiful game. It's not the beautiful game like soccer, but a beautiful, beautiful game. And there's nothing better to me than a good old alley-oop or a pass out for a three. Or for me also, they won't allow this anymore, some elbow throwing. But who am I to judge? That Suns team connects with me, and it still connects with me. For God's sakes, I had a poster of all the Suns players from a Circle K in Phoenix. They had, God, let me see if I can still name all the players. Okay, here we go. Nagil Knight, Richard Dumas, Charles Barkley, Tim Kempton, Kevin Johnson, Oliver Miller, Mark West, Dan Marley, Tom Chambers, AC Green. Good Lord, I can't think. Oh, damn. I forgot Danny Shays played for the Suns for a bit. Danny Shays played for the Suns for a cup of coffee. God. Cedric Sabalas. That's who I was forgetting. Cedric Sabalas. I can still name all of those Suns players. And no, by the way, I'm not looking at Google. I use my phone as my voice recorder for this, so I'm not looking at Google. So you know I'm not using that to name all the players. I'm sure I probably missed a couple, but what the fuck, right? That team connects with me. That was the first team I fell in love with for sports, in sports. I love the Suns. I love that team. Of course, Paul Westfall's the coach. And here's the other funny thing. He used to go to the team shop a lot, which is funny. But it's also funny because every bald black man I saw as a 3 and 4 year old in Phoenix walking around, I used to call Charles Barkley. Now people are going to be like, why would you do that now? My mom was mortified. But that's how I said Charles Barkley. And I called bald black man Charles Barkley. I'm sorry. I apologize for my accidental racism. I did not know I was 3. Okay? And the other cool thing, which I'll post a picture on my Facebook here in a little bit. But I forgot Danny Ainge. God damn it. I really should have known that. Danny Ainge, that Suns team too, that they brought on. I have hats. Now, Danny Ainge, this is another thing that made the Suns different in Phoenix at that time. Danny Ainge used to do a charity softball game, and he owned the hat club. Or he had his name on the hat club. A bunch of chain stores in Phoenix. I won a contest to go on the field at the Phoenix Municipal Stadium in South Phoenix at that time, where the A's used to do their spring training. But I won a contest to go to the Municipal Stadium and meet Danny Ainge, and he could not have been nicer. Even to a 6-year-old idiot like me, Danny Ainge was awesome. Charles Barkley was awesome. And I still have the 2 signed hats. I think it was Barkley's Bruisers and Danny's Destroyers. But I have 2 signed hats by Barkley and Ainge that are in my possession that I recently got back. So, that's pretty cool. And I'll post that picture later on, just to kind of show you that it's real. But, yeah, man, that was the Suns back in those days. And like I said, I live in Salt Lake City, and people still extol the virtues of those 96 to 98 Jazz teams. I mean, people fall in love with their sports, and people fall in love with their teams. And like I said, it's celebrity culture. If it affects us in a positive way, of course it's going to make us excited. It's going to get us emotional. Why would you want to shit on that? Especially if it affects you in a positive way. Why do people shit on that? Things that people love. You know, you can talk about how great those Suns teams were, like I have and did. And it's what gets me excited. I still get excited. You know, I watching a lot of the old footage from the Suns games of the early 90s. It gets me excited. And it gets me excited to talk about this. And this was why it was going to be one of the first topics I talked about. Because it gets me excited. It gets me revved up. And I feel like everyone should have a passion. Or something that gets them excited. And if you have that passion, why not go out and show it, you know? Why not go and love what you do and love what you watch? You know, why not? So, this has been my journey into the 92-93 Suns, how they affected a lot of us. I'm sure it's going to be, next week should be good. I haven't thought of a topic yet, but I'm pretty sure I'll think of one. But anyway, I'll talk to you later. This has been the BK Project. I'm your host, Brady Kellogg. Good night now.